welcome to another episode of IMNano.
Putting the I in IMNano, I am your host, Irfani.
And I am your other host, Monica.
And today, as part of our Nano Life series, we have a special guest who will be sharing his experiences, advice, and opinions.
We'd like to welcome Dr. Bruno Scocozza to the show, who did his PhD at the Max Planck Institute of Molecular Physiology. He specializes in bringing together nanophysics and synthetic biology. So Bruno, tell us more. What was your research focus for your doctorate? What was the day-to-day at Max Planck, and what did you do? Let's start there. It's a lot, so please feel free to talk as much as you like.
Right, okay. So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be with you today. So what was the research focus of my doctorate? That was focused on, I studied originally physics, and I felt that I wanted to actually change some things in medicine. So that's why I went for a PhD in biophysics. And I went to a lab where we really did that mix between physics and biology in situ. And so the PhD, I did like 3 projects, one of which didn't work at all, but taught me biology because I knew nothing. And it was in reactive oxygen species, how cells use reactive oxygen species functionally. And the biggest part of my PhD was actually focused on reconstituting artificial cells, trying to make artificial cells from scratch. I entered that project. That was a long project that I entered a team of really talented biochemists. And so what we were trying to do is make an artificial cell where we had a little vesicle made of lipids, and make it react to our external stimuli. So we would embed inside the vesicle some things that would in some way simulate or emulate signaling pathways, and then they would make the cell change its shape, so respond by changing its shape. And that project was extremely interdisciplinary. And so in general, overall, my day-to-day in Max Planck was, I would say, quite a typical routine, splitting my time between a lot of data analysis and programming. And our lab was very strongly focused also on microscopy. So I spent a lot of time in the lab and in the microscope. They are measuring the samples, changing the microscope, and then going back to analyze the data, and then go back to the microscope and back and forth.
Can I ask you a question about the artificial cells?
Yeah.
So you said that you basically make a lipid and then you make a vesicle of lipids?
Correct. So we make
How does that differ from liposomes compared to cells?
So I don't remember the exact definitions, right? Like a liposome
but it's still surrounded by lipids, right? So the structure is always there's a double layer, bilayer.
So these vesicles are, I guess, a subcategory of liposome. So it's a liposome.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So it's a lipid bilayer that makes a sphere.
Yeah. How do you make it react to different stimuli? Like, what do you inject in there?
Yeah, so what we use was optogenetics. I don't know if you are aware, but maybe I can really explain it shortly. So basically, people found out that naturally molecules or proteins in plants react to light, right? And so then they extracted those genes, and then you can express them, purify them, and put them inside the vesicle. And you can choose if you want to put them in the membrane or in the so in the lumen of the vesicle, right? So inside. And so what we did is what happens normally in a regular cell is that when a signal comes for certain growth factors, then they tend to, the growth factors are receptors that are at the membrane. And when a signal comes, they recruit stuff from the cytosol, so from the middle of the cell, and then it goes to the membrane. And so to emulate that, you have optical dimerizers, right? So you can shine light and they will come together. So if you put one part of your optical dimerizer at the membrane and the other one floating in the lumen, upon light, then you will translocate all of that to the membrane. So that's how you start to emulate that process. Yeah.
Wow. I'm always really interested with artificial, like whenever us humans try to create something that's very naturally occurring in nature, it's such a complex process. That's really amazing, trying to, you know, emulate whatever is already happening.
Yeah, so once someone told us really interestingly that if you really think about it, what we are doing is basically getting pig brains, blending them in a blender, and then like purifying that and then trying to put it back the brain together. So it's a little bit
That's true. That's
strange,
very
yeah.
true.
That's
Yeah.
very true. I think it was so James Tour, Professor Tour from Rice University, he also stated that he makes molecules for a living because he's an organic chemist, and he can't tell you how difficult it is to just replicate nature. So
Yeah.
not just small molecules, but you're doing cells, which is an even more complex process.
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely difficult. It makes you wonder how nature does it so
Yeah.
naturally, regularly, for sure.
Yeah. So you mentioned as well, like for your day-to-day, you do microscopy, programming, you know, going back and forth between all that. I mean, it's a challenge in itself trying to balance all together, right? But in addition to those, what other personal challenges have you had to face during your time in grad school?
Yeah, so I think the first personal challenge was when I moved, I knew very little, actually nothing about biology. So I basically just sat down, read a 1,000-page book all the way in 1 month. And that's, you know, I got my basic knowledge, and then I would understand when they would say this is a kinase. Okay, yeah, now I know what a kinase is, and not get lost. Biology has a lot of names for things. In physics, there's like 3 things: the photon and the proton. And that's it.
That's so true.
And
very
these things are there since we know, since, you know, they're really old. The books of physics don't change. The books of biology change a lot. And so, generally speaking, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I never thought of it like that.
This book I read, the Albert's changes. Now it has 6 editions. While when I went to uni in physics, the Landau is like from 1920 from the Russians. I mean, and it's still what we study there. This transition was difficult, but I think it was super interesting. So I didn't feel it so difficult. And I think that first project that I saw it was going nowhere, letting it go was you know, learning how to fail fast and pivot fast, right? I think overall, I think one of the challenges of being a physicist in biology is if you're open enough to what biological systems tell you is that you have to change your sense of beauty, or how we perceive beauty as really compact equations from which you can derive everything, and we do not embrace very much. So physicists generally love this compactness, this elegance, while in our biological mindset embraces diversity, complexity, and super compact things that, you know, from which you can deduce the history of the universe. So I think this mental change implies that then you have a lot of difficulties in your day-to-day basis, because variables are not under your control. Cells are doing what
They have
cells
their own
do,
thing.
not what
Yeah.
there are no knobs that you can change, like generally. And so the way of thinking, the way of investigating a complex biological system requires another mentality, and finding out and being comfortable with that mentality it was really interesting.
Any follow-up questions to that, Irfani?
I just really like your analogy about this, like the compactness of physicists. And then I used to do a lot of biology and physiology, and I can attest that there's so many factors, variables interplaying with each other, and it's a very complex process. But because they come together, that's why we find the beauty in all this complexity. But
Exactly.
yeah, physics, you know, compact.
Compact. So I think that for sure, like, I think it's kind of harmful to talk about like physicists and biologists in such a way. We shouldn't deny the existence of these phenotypes also, right? But I think, you know, because otherwise we create some sort of artificial division that actually many people, you know, we are trying to integrate things and not disintegrate them. And I think I always say that if we want to solve relevant medical problems of this century, we cannot think in disciplines, because if you think about a disease, the disease has no clue what a discipline is, right? The disease is a disease, and they do what they do. So if you think like, you know, this is an issue for biology to solve. And this is an issue for whatever is necessary to learn or tackle and so on. Now, this has no clue where we humans put the division in disciplines. However, this is a constant fight that I have with my physicist friends who went for quantum physics, and especially now when talking about the current pandemic. I'm really frustrated to hear their simplistic ways of thinking. And
Really?
yeah, it's very clear that they cannot handle a complex system like a virus that can mutate, plus public policy, plus many things. So it's very complex for them to think in a complex way, right? And many people are very prone to what's called cognitive closure, right? Like they wanna say, okay, this is done, I understood it. But in a complex system, you never understood it.
That's very true.
Very well said. So that brings the following question. And during your time in grad school, what were some of your most enduring or valuable memories?
In general, even though I enjoy a lot being alone and in my personal peace, I think my most enduring memories are always related to other people. I think there was a part of this project that became extremely intense, really intense, and we were a team collaborating, and my fondest memories are in that peak where we were really working like crazy and collaborating a lot and asking each other, okay, what do you need? How do I cover you? How long does it take you? And everything with a really good, with my colleagues, with really good atmosphere between each other. And I think that to have intensity and intellectual challenge with people that were nice was a really good memory. And the other memories are, as I said, also like being alone in the darkness of the microscope. It's a nice moment for introspection. I like that.
True. Yeah,
You can think for yourself, and it's a little bit like a temple, a microscope room, right? Where you can do your own microscope mantra, I think.
Accurate description of it. Very good. Yeah.
I mean, I just want to say that I like how, there's a common theme with all scientists, how we like to work alone, but then some fondest memories are always with other people who work with us, although we value our alone time whenever we work on our own experiments,
Yeah, definitely. I think that they're like, the academic work has a little bit of a distance and a path to learn from other industries that work not on a lonely basis, but much more in cross team achievements. And I think we are very much, so this is a whole topic that we can open that box if you like. I think that the level of solitariness or loneliness, that this is your individual career, this is something that there's some room for improvement and rethinking there. Forces you to this game of, you're here for your own doctorate, but at the same time you need to collaborate with people to make things great happen. So philosophically, it's a little bit of a clash from the beginning, right?
It's a struggle for me every day because there's my own project I have to focus on, and all at the same time we're collaborating with other people. It's like managing that balance. Which one should I prioritize?
Yeah.
So
I think another of the challenges that I faced. So it is all a process for me, at least. It's all a process of changing yourself, right? And I think that one of the biggest challenges for me is I'm clearly an overthinker. I had to fight a lot against that, to realize that you cannot pre-optimize things all the time. So if you're going to go on a trip, you cannot pre-calculate where all the pitfalls are going to be on the holes on the road, because then you never start the trip, right? So and this is a bit like what was a real challenge for me to understand that this was the case, that I was doing this extreme pre-optimization of nothing instead of being very goal focused and moving quickly. Not because you're in a rush, but it's just because it's more efficient.
Right. So did you find yourself think for a long time before executing your experiments?
Yeah. So in the beginning, this time started to reduce itself. In the beginning, I would think, okay, where can everything fail? And then I realized,
Really?
just go and do it, and I had, thankfully, some colleagues around me that were super doers, and they illuminated me, and I so like, wait, this guy did 15 of these today, and I just thought about it. So why is he doing 15 and I'm just thinking about one? And so it's not about output in terms of numbers, but I was way on the on one side of things and on the
So just to
pre-thinking.
be more efficient. Just to be more efficient.
So to just try it out, go for it and fail.
So looking back, would you have done anything differently? Would you still go to grad school with all the struggles and challenges you faced?
I mean, I think this is an interesting box. I asked myself this question. I think the ecosystem of the PhD is not what we imagine it to be from the first place. So if we make a bit of extreme simplifications or metaphors, if you think like in a time of very long time ago, a PhD was like this noble endeavor to go and find how nature works. And this is what you have in your mind. Well, that might have been in moments where you had these, how are they called, mecenas? Mecenas, the people that fund artists to do what they do. So the artists,
Right.
but now the ecosystem is much more complex. So the ecosystem heavily involves the industry. So, for example, in Germany, there's many people that do a PhD because they think that without it, they cannot get a job, which is very different from going there and saying, I want to understand how nature works. And I think undoubtedly, and that the publishing industry is now playing a very questionable game, science. And so I think the first thing is, so if you think about that, the question is, are you going to the ecosystem that you imagined, or are you going to another one that is much more complex with many conflicts of interest? So I think in that sense, I didn't have that insight at the moment to think of all of that. I thought, okay, I'm going for understanding how nature works, which I did to a very great extent thanks to the place that I went to. But I think that's an insight I would have considered. The other thing that I think it's a fallacy usually is when people say like, yeah, but after a PhD, then you have a PhD, and otherwise you have nothing. No, well, you can have 4 years of working experience, right? So you can have 4 years of working experience. You could have funded a company. So evaluating the cost of opportunity of your decision of the PhD is it's much better than you think. So I don't know if thinking if I would have done something different or not is it's a bit like trying to do an experiment with your own life. Okay, like you're trying to build a protocol for your life. Right? If I would have changed that, then so there were many things that I enjoyed, many things that I didn't, and I would have. Sometimes I also think, for example, I would have liked to do a much more applied PhD, like much closer to medical doctors. So I always, had this intention. Now I'm moving a bit in that direction. But on the other hand, I really like, questioning the fundamentals of things. So that part of me got really satisfied and fulfilled and nourished. Is that the correct word? Nourished, nurtured. So I'm happy about that.
So did you go into PhD thinking that you wanted to understand nature?
No, I went to understand nature. Yeah.
Why did you choose to go across the sea to Max Planck Institute? Why choose there?
So what took me to Max Planck? So Argentina has I come from Argentina, right? And Argentina has a very strong connection to Germany, or at least in the optics groups and so on. And on the other hand, before deciding on a PhD, I had the opportunity, which I'm very grateful for, to go to and visit several labs. So I wrote a lot of people and I visited their labs. I went to Oxford, I went to Cambridge, I went to many places that were really supposedly good. And bottom line, the reason why I ended up in this Max Planck was because I smelled that there was something going on really interesting there. And it was very clear the difference of that place to all the others, even comparing to like these other top universities or so-called top universities. It was very clear for me. I smell these places where the creative things are happening. I didn't want to go to a place where they were doing more of the same on the one hand. And another thing that I didn't want to go was to a place where, so I was looking for this transition into biology, right? And what I saw a lot is that there were like physics labs collaborating with biologists. So, you know, this made of a separate environment, but this place where I went, I was really cohabitating, and this was quite unique, very unique. And so I smelled that, and I smelled that, you know, that there you could do something really, really interesting, and I was right. I think that, or at least where I am very comfortable in, is in the interfaces of things. I find myself always more comfortable in these places because there's no definitions for things. You have to make up things that don't exist. That is actually, if you think it is kind of a lazy choice, right? Because there you can create for free. No, it takes, it's not so much like that, but in some way maybe. Yeah, so I really like interfaces, and not only, so now for my next steps, I'm also looking to interface with outside of science, right? So what about, you know, psychologists? What about medical doctors? What about marketing people? What about business people? Smart people all over the world, and I think always, you know, encountering these new worlds is really interesting. And I think where I went in that lab in Max Planck was exactly that. You could play in that interface, and it was wonderful.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. And so what are you working on now that you've finished your PhD and all that?
So now that I finished my PhD, the first thing is I'm working on myself. I think that's really important to understand many. So I think that in some way, when you take a decision to do a PhD, in many of the cases, it's like a default choice, right? Because you're running under the bias of you are in uni, and who is your environment? Yeah, the professors. Yeah, what did the professors do? Well, an academic career. So who else did you see that didn't do that? So you have like a bias there. And so, you know, all your friends go and do a PhD and so on. It's not, I'm not saying that I took the decision because of that, but there's certainly a component in that equation of like plain inertia. So I think the first thing I'm doing after finishing is like a retrospective and thinking backwards. Okay, let's write the story from the beginning. I was born in Argentina, and this happened to me. I'm interested in this, and I was also interested in other things. And so, why did I end up here, right? You know, through some introspection, it became clear I always wanted to start a company, and even though it's always really clear for me, you can enter times where things become unclear because of external noise and, you know, inputs that are not your own. And so once I cleared out all that external noise, it was very clear. I'm now then starting this entrepreneurial journey and moving to Berlin to some incubator to start a company again in the realms of biotech and healthcare, medtech, sometimes also called, and so on. And I'm now in the process of really trying to figure out what I want to solve in the world, and how and with who. And it's a very, very, very exciting thing to do. I'm constantly contacting people, getting contacted by people from all different, and I think there's a really, really good non-toxic atmosphere. I think everyone is very open from us that I talked with. I constantly talk now with strangers that I write on LinkedIn. And I tell them, hi, I'm really interested in what you're doing, or hi, I wanted to ask you, you know, where can I find a co-founder, or how did you find your investors, stuff like that. And everyone is really open, and I really enjoy. I think there's something about like again like a tribal ritual of the entrepreneurship, with that we are all like in a horde going together in the same path, facing the same problems. And I think what is different from that to the PhD is that there is no Kopf, you know, like there's no head, there's no, you know, we are on our own. Yeah, there's investors and there's constraints and everything like that, but we're all in our own journey, and they are not templated by institutions, universities that have so and so interests. I mean, surely, as I said, there's constraints, the atmosphere is different.
I mean, now that you're becoming an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
would you say that for prospective entrepreneurs, graduate school is beneficial? Or would you say just go ahead and become an entrepreneur?
So I think my answer probably goes back again to the tradition that we have in Argentina of fundamentals, that fundamentals are somehow important, right? Our degrees are really, we learn a lot of the fundamental physics. I think that, or biology or whatever you do. I think that when I look at Europe, they're trying to make this, they already, in Germany, they split the diploma or the diploma into the bachelor and the master's, and you get all these kind of short things which have their own benefits, but at the same time, and they can also be very specialized, right? Like here in Europe, you can do a master's in a certain type of plastic.
Really?
And I think, that leaves you a little bit without the wide scope. And I am personally like to have that wide scope. Some people are fine without it, right? So, and they can have extremely successful entrepreneurial journeys, and they will find a wide scope as they go. But in my case, I think, then coming back to the PhD, I think a PhD gives you like a very interesting, solid foundation if you want to do hard tech. And this is valued, right? So when you look at pitches and demo days of innovation, it's like, you might think that this is a moonshot, but actually we are a team of, and then, that they cite the crazy PhD guy that, spent 5 years trying to develop some electrochemical sensor or something that will make blood tests faster, right? And that has, so I'm not saying that for prospective entrepreneurs, it's good or bad. It just depends on where you feel that you want to be. But what I wouldn't do is like, shoot the ball too far, right? Saying, okay, I want to become a hard tech entrepreneur, so I do a PhD. Well, I don't know if that's the right way of thinking about it. You need to feel your next decision. You cannot do it because of something that may happen in four years afterwards. You need to feel the decision when you take it. So I think for software, it's very different, right?
Yeah. So depending on themselves, right? Based on what they have already known, and if they think PhD might be useful, then they could also pursue a PhD first. Yeah.
I think I would say, like, investigate your options very well and keep open-minded in looking at all the possible options. And thinking about the cost of opportunity of taking one decision versus the other one. So for sure you cannot rationalize it. There's many things that you cannot determine. But for example, if you feel that you want to do something really applied, then go for something applied, or why not going directly into a startup that does something applied? I mean, yeah.
So I heard that you were also a chef at one point in your life and working in a Michelin star restaurant. I was wondering if you could tell us that story a little bit.
What happened was that I quitted one restaurant because they were employing me in a really good one.
Okay. Wait, how did you get to the restaurant part? Like, how did that even come in your life that you were working in a restaurant? Yeah.
So when I was 17, finishing school, I got like the Epstein-Barr virus, which is a virus for adolescents or something. And then I had to go to hospital for a week or something. And then I realized that the only channel I liked was the cooking channel, and all the others I really disliked. And so I went with a lot of ideas home, like saying, I want to cook this and that, and so on. That's how cooking started in general. This passion for cooking, which is like making experiments. The difference is that the result is in no longer than 24 hours there and really fast. In most of the cases in 5 minutes. Make a wok, then boom, result, and then you can optimize. And it's also a bit more artistic. That's why I'm attracted to it. And so I decided to go to cooking restaurants. So I took a flight to Barcelona. I knew no one. I knew nothing. I had no idea. And I started knocking doors and saying, hi, do you need a cook? And I started cooking there in places. So I did that for 6 months. And so it was the best time I ever had.
You just knocked on doors?
Yeah.
Wow.
At
But that's the,
17.
no. I was already 23 when I
Oh,
did that.
okay. I was like, there we go.
Oh my
No,
goodness.
I was already 20, no, 23. Yeah, something like that. No, I was 25.
Oh, so right
Yeah.
before you started PhD.
Yeah, so I took a time in between my master's and my PhD. I think it's a really good thing to do, to take some time in between these phases, to take a step back and look at things. And then I went to this restaurant, and I was employed at a company that randomly sent cooks to kitchens that suddenly needed someone. So I went 3 days to one place, 5 days to another place, and I did that for a couple of months. And you would do breakfasts, or whatever. It didn't matter. It's like they just needed someone for the time, and then I would go. But before that, I was employed at one really close to a beach, but they were doing somehow. I was washing dishes there, and I thought, no, Bruno, you came here to cook, not to wash dishes, and so on. And here I have to say that washing dishes was amazing. This also taught me a lot of stuff, and I understand why, when they say like you have to start washing dishes. Yes, it's that way. You have to start washing dishes. It's critical that you understand that. And I somehow wish I would have stayed longer there washing dishes to get better at it.
Really?
But then I quit it because they said like now, you can go to this one Michelin star restaurant as like a helper in a hotel. And on the first day, there was a Mexican guy doing an internship there that he was not interested at all in cooking. And he gave me a fish, and then I plated the fish, and then he went out. This we are talking about restaurants where you pay like, I don't know, every person pays 300 euros, right? And I don't know why I was suddenly in an off day of the chef in charge together with this random Mexican guy. And then this Romanian waiter, she comes back and tells us, guys, and shows us a plate, and there was like an etiquette, like a label, like a plastic label of the fish in the bottom of the plate. So the plate had gone out with a plastic in the bottom. And then there was like the scandal. Okay, then we will have to reimburse the 600 euros to this table, and all this stuff. And the next day I woke up and they called me like, you don't have to come today. I'm like, what did I do? What happened? Yeah, because of the fish stuff. Yeah, but I didn't do anything. This other guy forgot the label. And then I was the whole day trying to think, how did that label get inside that plate? I couldn't imagine how it got inside. But then in the end, I figured it out, how it got there. And
did the other guy put it there?
Yeah, the guy didn't check. So he gave me the fish, and the fish already had it in the bottom. And then I transferred the fish from like the heating plate where we heat it up to the plate where the people would eat it. But the fish, you don't touch it too much. It's not like you start flipping it and looking it around. The fish is really delicate. You just transfer it to the plate like it came, and then make the decorations, and then it goes. But he had put the fish the fish was vacuum sealed, and he put it, and it had the plastic bag had a label, and he put it in boiling water. And then when he took out the package, then opened the vacuum seal, then slided the fish and brought along with him the label to the bottom in the package.
Oh my goodness.
And then then this was like my one day at one. I was because no, that day I was not gonna. That day it was not officially in the one Michelin star because it was closed. That day I was in the one next to it, but they shared the kitchen. And so because hotels maybe have one kitchen for 3 different restaurants, and it was one day away of working one day in a Michelin star restaurant.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
But then I ended up in a much happier place. It was a tacos, the kind of gourmet tacos place from a super nice Mexican chef, amazing, and he I still talk with him till today, not extremely frequently, but this also kind of is a bit like Max Planck, Harvard, whatever, or a small place where you can be with people that are really nice, and I don't know, difficult, I also get trapped in, yeah. So in Spanish, we have also two words. One is cualidad and the other one is calidad. So calidad is something that you can measure, like, you know, the ingredients, are they high quality, or is a university in the top of the world? This is like quality that you can measure, but there's also like quality, like the quality of, in a more like the cualidad, like this less measurable thing, right? Like the humanity of someone, the creativity, or the, I don't know, the compassion. So there's these two qualities, right? So cualidad and calidad. And I think I try to search now more for one, so for the healthier one than for the number one that is very tyrant.
Yeah, the healthy one, not the number one. Okay, we got to quote that. That's awesome. That's awesome. You're great, Bruno. I can't wait for you to write a book, you know, and then you can
Yeah, you
teach
should.
workshops and seminars. People want to listen to you. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, the way
Well,
you
thank
talk,
you
I
very
mean,
much.
as someone who just met you, the way you talk definitely is captivating.
I guess I watched too many
Yeah.
Sting videos.
Oh, good. Wow, you're
And
great.
then,
The story isn't over yet. Tune in next time to listen more.
Yes, that was only part 1 of Bruno's story. Part 2 coming soon.
Take care.
And stay curious.